President-elect Joe Biden has promised that the United States will rejoin the Paris Agreement. And there is a need for a global change leader to develop the solutions that can keep global warming below 2 degrees. There is no silver bullet in terms of solutions. So there's a need, for example, for e-mobility systems to replace the present oil, petrol and diesel systems that can reduce the use of oil. And there's a need for new supply chains that are less dependent on transportation across the world. There's a large need for investment in different areas. There's a need, for example, for technology development, because the technologies that are present now are not yet mature. They need to become inexpensive and competitive against incumbent technologies. There's a need to develop new companies and invest in new companies. Companies that, for example, develop new technologies and products, those that build and operate new sustainable systems, and not least, companies that produce and distribute their goods locally instead of globally. And there's a need for the large-scale adoption of the new products by large swathes of the population in every country. But we also need to remember that climate change is not the only challenge. The International Energy Agency, which is financed by 30 countries and by independent experts on oil production, warn that oil production is likely to go into decline in the next few years. This means that countries will have access to less oil, and both as a fuel and as an industrial raw material. And this will have dramatic effects on economies and on job markets. There's a widespread belief at present that the development of the sustainable systems will be market driven, that people will not have to worry about it. But they will have to, because governments are the only players that have the financial strength and the long-term perspective on investments to invest a lot of money without the need to get rapid payback on their investment. So, and in the case of these new systems, there are only few users at the early stages. For example, in e-mobility, 0.5% of cars are electric or hybrid, and the number of electric and hybrid cars is growing by a quite small number. Only 2 million per year are added at the present pace, which means that at the present pace, it would take 500 years to transform car systems or car fleets across the world. And in the case of heavy transportation, there are no systems ready to become implemented on a large scale. At present, all supply chains are dependent on long-distance transportation. And there's a need for very, very large investments to transform production and distribution to sustainability. And it will, by necessity, take decades to build new systems. But this is nothing new, because in the case of computers, development started after the Second World War, and the development of computers built on the punch card machines that had been used for almost 100 years before that. In the cases of telephony, automotive systems, railways, power generation and power grids, and water purification and sewage, it took decades until the systems became competitive and cost efficient. So technologies need to be developed by governments in early stages, or development needs to be financed by governments in the early stages, because in various ways governments have been the parties that have driven technology in the past. So in order to drive development of sustainability and resilience, governments need to develop the competence necessary to make the right decisions, like NASA did for the Apollo program. At present, the Swedish government is building up resources to electrify 2,000 kilometers of road networks until 2030. But this, of course, will not be enough to transform our transport systems to or our society at large to sustainability. Countries need to investigate how they can dramatically reduce dependence on transportation and oil over the coming decades. It can't be done in a few years. We already have access to most of the technologies we need, but we need to build very large resources for the change. And there's a need for experts, managers, and the general public to take part in the transformation as change leaders.